Ah yes, the Nissan Patrol. What a monster. With an Atmo petrol V8 cranking out a stout 295 kilowatts and 560 newton meters, plus a very capable chassis underneath it, the Patrol is capable of taking you far off-road and sounding like a race car in the process of doing so. It's very cool, and is what every dirt-loving Aussie looks for in an off-road wagon. Mud, dust, rocks, it doesn't matter. Pop it in low range and lock the diffs, and the Patrol is ready to take you and your family well off the beaten track in the pursuit of an off-road adventure.
But one of the main reasons that people buy cars like the Nissan Patrol is to tour the long, lonely highways of this massive country that we call Australia. And crucial to that activity is fuel economy. You really need to know how far your car can go and how much fuel it burns in order to make sure that you can plan your trip appropriately. Because if you don't, or if your car is just way thirstier than you thought it would be, you end up stuck in the middle of nowhere with no juice. And that can be a pretty scary thing in a country that has an environment as hostile as Australia's.
So, with that in mind, I'm going to put this big rig through a little test. Some claim that big capacity naturally aspirated petrol engines like the Patrol's Y62 V8 do their best work on long distance, steady throttle driving, while others say turbo diesels are a better bet. But what I want to do is go out and get some numbers of my own so that all of you Patrol owners out there, especially the ones that are planning on doing some big highway miles, have some solid information with which to plan your trips. If you're in the market for a Patrol, this information should also be pretty handy for you, because the best kind of consumer is the one that makes smart and informed decisions. Just a quick note before we kick off, I did this test in a pre-2024 vehicle, which means it has the terrible old infotainment system and not the much more highly featured 10.1-inch touchscreen with wireless smartphone mirroring, wireless phone charging, and extra USB ports that you get now. However, everything mechanical is identical, as there were no changes to engine performance, the transmission, suspension, wheel and tyre package, or bodywork for the 2024 model year. Therefore, the results you see here will be applicable to the updated model as well. I'm starting off in the inner suburbs of Melbourne. A quick splash of juice in the tank to top it off to the first click, and then I hop onto the Eastern Freeway, a 100km/h arterial road that eventually takes me to the Eastlink toll road. The entire time, I'm cruising at a fairly steady 100km/h, plus a quick intermission where I dash into a super stop to grab some lunch. After all that, I turned around and headed back home. Back into the city, back to the same servo I started the exercise from, and for the sake of consistency, I even used the same fuel bowser to top the tank back off to the first click. With the start and end point being the same, that means the total altitude difference over the duration of the exercise was 0, so the resulting numbers shouldn't be skewed by anything like that. This is as close to a pure highway run as I can make it. Then, once I had my fuel and distance numbers, it was time for a bit of light maths.
Okay, so where did we end up? Well, I've crunched the numbers, and the results are a little bit interesting because the trip computer in the car reckoned that we were doing 10.5 litres per 100 by the end of our little trip. We covered 358 kilometres in total and burned 39.96 litres of fuel, which means that our actual fuel consumption was 11.16. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy between the 10.5 that the car was telling us and the 11.16 actual litres per 100 kilometres that we burned. So do bear that in mind. If you own one of these things and you're planning a long trip, maybe don't trust the little computer in front of you so much, because that is more than half a litre per 100 kilometres is a fair margin of error in my opinion, especially if you're travelling very long distances. That could be the difference between making it to your next fuel stop and getting stranded. Now, 11.16 litres per 100 kilometres though is actually very close to the factory claim. The factory claim is 11.0. So we're only 0.16 off that, which is closer than I thought we would get, to be honest. So I was looking at the live fuel burn in the trip computer. I'm like, I don't think we're going to do it, because it seemed to be burning a lot of fuel when we were cruising at 100 kilometers an hour. However, we got appreciably close. At that fuel burn, and considering that the Patrol carries 140 litres of petrol in its tank, you get a maximum theoretical range of 1,254 kilometres, which is substantial, which is plenty of distance to cruise around Outback Australia in with a generous margin of safety, unless you're really deep into it. So that's a fair size range. That range is going to vary depending on what you're doing with the car and what you've done to the car. So whether you're towing something heavy, bear in mind this vehicle is rated to tow up to 3.5 tons, which is obviously a fair bit of weight to add to a car, and that's going to definitely affect the amount of fuel that you burn. Also, if you have roof racks or knobbly tires for dealing with mud and stuff, all of those things will bring your fuel economy down as well. And again, if you have passengers and cargo, as most people would, people use these things to take their family on long trips. So all of that additional weight and drag is going to affect your fuel burn. The number that I've got here, the 1,254 kilometers maximum range, that is a best case scenario. So always consider that. Do not just use this exercise as gospel. Do your own maths and figure out your own fuel burn as well. And let me know if you have one of these things and you've worked out your fuel consumption, your average fuel consumption on long distance trips. Drop a comment and let me know what you have found. I'd be very interested.
And so there you have it. Some real world testing with some actual transparency behind the methodology. There are no tricks and no gimmicks, and it's honestly pretty refreshing to see that Nissan's own fuel efficiency claim for the highway cycle is very close to what I was able to do in the real world. But once again, I need to stress that this was an absolute best case scenario, and I would be surprised if anyone was able to get a better result. Resisting the urge to really lean into that fantastic V8 was agonizing, because as soon as I did, I could see the trip computer reducing its range estimate almost instantly. Also, like I said, if you're carrying a lot of weight and you aren't compensating for that with tire pressures, and or you've done modifications that affect your Patrol's rolling resistance and aerodynamics, you're definitely not going to hit these numbers. That all being said, I hope this information helps you out in some way. Maybe you're in the market to buy a Patrol and you wanted some peace of mind about fuel efficiency, or maybe you just wanted to settle a bet with a mate. Whatever the case is, I hope you found it useful, and I thank you for watching. Please do subscribe if you like this kind of stuff, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye for now.